Good day to you. For those of you that may not know me, I'm Don Carroll. I've been here a number of years. My wife, Tiana, and I actually met here at Prestoncrest and have been here a number of years. We have three relatively young daughters in the children's program here. Over the years, we have just come to love this church family, love worshiping here. And part of that journey has been this rhythms of the inner life. I've had the opportunity to spend a number of sessions with Bob Chisholm and a number of the other men and women at the church here discussing this idea of spiritual discipline. I'll be frank with you, it's not something that I necessarily grew up with. Practicing spiritual disciplines, understanding them, walking through them. So it's been sort of a new journey over the last number of years. And it really has been fruitful in my own spiritual walk, my own spiritual development, understanding how these different disciplines play into my life. And it's very ironic as I walk through a number of these disciplines, a lot of times I come out to the other side thinking, well, this is relatively obvious, and it's sort of struck me, it's amazing that even though it seems obvious when you get to the other side until someone lays it out for you, it's not always obvious in the beginning. And so that's why I'm really thankful for this whole series that has been produced to try to give new perspective that you may not have had in the past. So the one we're going to talk about today is called Choosing, Giving God the Space to Act. I would argue this is probably one of the earlier ones that as you go through the spiritual disciplines and walk through these, this is one of the earlier ones you have to come to, because this is all about deciding and choosing which path you want to go down. So the way we'll do this, we'll sort of walk through a number of different writings and passages from a number of different authors and sort of piece together sort of what this process looks like. So as we walk through this, what I would like you to do is to keep in mind these three questions. And what I would ask is that you just sort of answer them as you know them today, and then as we walk through this, maybe as you may need to make some changes on these three questions. So the three questions are, what do you think of when you hear the word rule or rules? Number two, what do you think of when you hear the word discipline? And then number three, how effective are you at choosing to clear the noise in your life? We all have different opinions about rules and discipline. And I am prayerful that this session will help put some of those pieces together and maybe give you some new perspective on this. So let's first look at the idea of rules. So we'll start with this passage. You're likely to think of rules as boundaries that forbid us from doing something. Rather than being a set of laws that forbid us to do certain things, a rule of life is a set of guidelines that support or enable us to do the things we want and need to do. A rule is like a trellis, which offers support and guidance for a plant, helping it grow in a certain direction. A rule of life becomes descriptive in that it articulates our intentions and identifies the ways in which we want to live. When we fall short of these intentions, the rule becomes prescriptive, showing us how we can return to the path that we have set for ourselves and recapture our original vision. So in life, there are many of us that tend to be rule followers, and then there are many of us that tend not so much to follow the rules. However, all of us tend to sort of gravitate toward what our own path is. Now the reality is society just sends a barrage of different philosophies of life at us, anywhere from different religions, different worldviews, different cultures, even the absence of God completely is certainly a philosophy of life. And certainly there's an emphasis on self in all of these philosophies often. So any of these different paths truly become the foundation for you as you follow the guidelines from those different philosophies. And I would even argue some people will want to play life by ear and just sort of float and adjust as they see fit as they walk through life, not really ever tying them down to any particular philosophy or any guidelines, just sort of, we'll see how it all plays out. Well, even that approach, I would say, has a result. Often the result is sort of a chaotic life when you live by that approach. And that approach certainly limits your purpose and your direction. So all of these things, and one of the things as humans we have a lot of trouble with is submission. Well, all of these things you have to submit to. In fact, all humans submit to something along the way in their life. We don't always acknowledge that we submit to it, but we do all submit to some kind of philosophy. So that dates back to the garden. Wanting to submit, Adam and Eve, they decided they did not want to submit to God, which is the first case of actually humans trying to play God rather than just allowing God to be God. So we all develop this life that we adhere to by whatever set of rules that we have. If there are no guidelines, it's just a life of chaos. But whichever we do choose, we still submit to something. So these rules have a purpose beyond just telling us what we can and can't do. They actually set the path. It's the highway, it's the stripes on the highway that keep you in the middle of whatever philosophy you're following. So that's how rules really are important, and it's not just a matter of telling you what you can't do. So as we decide what rules we're going to take through life, and if we choose to focus on a God-driven life, then it all has to begin with submitting. So let's look at this next passage on submitting. It is time to begin. However stumbling or uncertain the beginning, it is worthwhile. Prayer is a matter of keeping at it. The rewards will come no other way. Thunderclaps and lightning flashes are very unlikely. It is well to start small and quietly. There's no need to tell one's friends or acquaintances. No need to plan heroic fast or all-night vigils. The goal of prayer is to give oneself away, or submitting. The Lord loves us, perhaps most of all, when we fail and we try again. I think it's so telling, and here at the beginning it talks about it's not going to come with thunderclaps and lightning. We often look for immediate results, and that's not the way this typically is going to happen. It's going to start small and quietly. And another thing is there in the middle of the screen, prayer is a matter of keeping at it. It is a persistence thing. It's a lot of small steps that will lead to something. When you fail at it, or let me put it this way, when you think you failed at it, when you feel like it's not working, you're not either experiencing any kind of movement in the path. What's comforting to know is that you just try again. You pick yourself up and try again. A number of years ago, a good friend of mine really turned me on to what the meaning of Lamentations 3, verse 22 and 23 talks about. It talks about new mercies every morning. And that's one of those things that I go through my day and I don't like the way it's turned out, but I just pick myself up and I try again tomorrow. God continues to shower me with this blessing of new mercies. And so as you start down the path of experiencing God's love, of choosing God's path, when you have those moments that you feel are failures, which are actually probably just baby steps along the way, but when you think they're failures, you just remember that you have new mercies every morning, and then you pick yourself up and try again. So while you're going down this path, I will say, even if you're choosing God, you can still get your priorities scrambled. Even if you think you're on the right path, it is possible to get your priorities sort of scrambled. So let's read through this one. A common theme in modern Christianity has been that head knowledge is how one becomes more adept at following Christ. The more you know, the better you'll do. But in fact, that hasn't proven to be true. It seems like the Christian life is more like a baseball shortstop. A young player can watch videos, read books by the greatest shortstops of all time, and listen to coaches lecture on what makes a good shortstop. But what will truly make him a good shortstop is getting on the field and practicing. As the disciplines are practiced, your life becomes more attuned to God's life, and you become more at one with the rhythms of creation. So it's just like the athlete who anticipates the movement on the field, or it's just like the pianist that inhabits the music. It's just like the carpenter who can run his hands over the grain and see what this rough cut of wood can become. So all these things demand practice. And I propose you begin to imagine the Christian life in much the same way. I want to go back to the beginning of this. It talks about head knowledge. And one of the things I love about our fellowship is that there has been such an emphasis on knowing the Scripture. And that head knowledge is so important and so crucial. However, if it becomes the only priority in our journey toward God, then we're going to miss a crucial piece of it, because we're not actually practicing it, we're just knowing it. Knowledge is not enough. Now, there's a lot of great authors and speakers out there that will help with head knowledge. And in fact, a lot of times we will read or listen to people who have experienced God or experienced God's love. But that's not the same as us actually experiencing God's love. There is a difference in reading about people who know Jesus or listening to people who experience the love, but that doesn't mean that we're automatically going to know Him ourselves. So for you and me to actually experience God, we have to practice like the baseball shortstop. Choosing to practice all the disciplines is like the pianist that's rehearsing for hours on a single piece, or a carpenter that has chiseled hundreds of pieces in his life. And that's when it becomes second nature to us directly, not just reading about it or just listening about it, but actually doing it. So that's where the head knowledge can actually be deceiving. We think we have the head knowledge, we understand intellectually what has to happen, but unless we're actually practicing it, we're going to fall short. So that knowledge is crucial, but we have to, without practicing it, it simply becomes information that we have about it, about God and about His love, not actually practicing it. So we have to make sure we keep our priorities straight. So in order to do that, once again, it all is about repetition. So most important is our deciding on some time and duration of our lives to be cleared for God and sticking to this time and duration. This means that once we've decided to do it, we treat it just like brushing our teeth. It is something that we do without agonizing over it each time. If we leave the crack for redeciding every day, then it becomes complicated. We've undercut the very simplicity that prayer time can reveal. It's about repetition. God wants us to clear this time for Him. So we have to have a rule in place for our lives to protect that time. It's just like the simple things, this passage mentioned brushing your teeth. It's just something that you do every day. I have the same discussion with my daughters. There have been times when they don't want to go to church, or, why do we have to do this and that? And it's like, well, it's because what we do. And sometimes I even have to acknowledge, maybe I don't feel like going to church. Maybe I don't feel like going to Bible study, but this is what we do. And when you commit yourself to clearing that space, well, God has an opportunity to act within that space. There is one, before we get to that, I will argue that all of us are great at clearing space for a lot of things in our lives. We can clear space for American Ninja Warrior, and we can clear space for This Is Us, finding out what is going on in their family. We clear space for sporting events, for our children's sports, for ballet, for piano. We clear space for and commit ourselves to those spaces for any number of things. And it is no different with this choosing to spend time with God in prayer or in study or in fellowship with other people. So we have to remember we have to stay dedicated to that. And one of the crucial pieces of staying dedicated to that is what's on the screen here. It's this idea of redeciding. It is true with anything that you have purposed to do, that you have decided to do. You cannot, if you're going to be committed to it, you cannot leave cracks in there. You cannot leave open the possibility of redeciding whether I'm going to do this or not. Because once you do, for one thing I'll tell you, Satan will certainly use that opportunity to get his foot in the door and help you to redecide something different than what you originally decided. So you have to be committed to not redeciding. And that is true with giving up a bad habit, starting a good habit. You can't allow the idea of redeciding come back into it. So if there's one thing you really take away from this, it's this concept of redeciding. I don't even know if that's a real word, but the concept is if we're going to be successful, we can't continue to redecide or have the opportunity to redecide things. We just have to stick with what we've decided we're going to do. So as we go down this path, what's going to get in our way? So let's look at a couple of different passages about what's going to get in our way. There is nothing in Western culture or even our religious subculture to support us entering into times for unproductive being rather than frenetic doing. A decade or so ago, when our society was on the cusp of many technological breakthroughs that we now take for granted, there was much editorializing about the hope of a 4-day work week accomplishing the same amount of work that we did in a 5-day week. But that has not happened. In fact, the drivenness of our pace of life has become even more pronounced. Rather than working 9 to 5 days, 5 days a week, we find technology has made it more difficult to have any boundaries around our working life. Since we can access voicemail, email, and the internet from anywhere, many of us work 6 or 7 days a week. Technology was supposed to help us lead saner lives, but instead it has led us to expect more of ourselves and to try to cram more in. So the world with its technology and its efficiency gains, they are not working on your behalf. That is so difficult to remember a lot of times, but they are not working on your behalf. This idea of shorter work weeks has been replaced with just doing more in the same work week. Why do we have to shorten it? We can actually be more efficient, right? Here's some of the other things that get in the way. So media walks with us in our pockets every day. Big tech is always developing new ways to make sure that their products are on our phones or on our screens in just a never-ending stream of data. They're going to try to, media wants you to redecide that path or that space that you've carved out for God. They're trying to help you redecide. Entertainment has found ways to let us stream endless binge sessions of often shows that show a worldview that is not consistent with the worldview that we adhere to, that we are attempting to walk toward. They're trying to help you redecide. In fact, our standard of living in this country or in first world countries, certainly, the standard of living is sort of previously unknown to mankind at all, and it just gives us this endless stream of options of things to occupy our time and our minds. We often don't spend time finding a roof to put over our head or food to fill ourselves or our families. So what we do is we fill our time with all these other things to entertain us, to take our minds off things. Let's look at this other passage. So a generation ago, it was a predicted task that took up much of our lives would take much less time or even be done without much direct human effort at all. We have not taken advantage of this gift to make more space. Most of us have instead chosen to do even more work, using more time to make more money and purchase more things that won't really satisfy us. We have chosen and continue to choose more hurry. Letting society choose for you, well, it's going to do what Ecclesiastes tell us. The world is just going to grind and grind and grind. And if you let society or you let the world choose things for you, it will just essentially grind you up over time. It never ends. The sun rises and the sun sets. The wind blows from the north to the south and back around again. It never ends. It just grinds on you all the time. That is why we have to be purposeful in choosing what our path is going to be. So choosing this sacred time that you're going to allow for God, it can't be compromised. Because if you allow it to be compromised, if you allow it to be redecided for you, there are plenty of other options that will try to get in the way. So talking about this decision being purposeful, I love this paragraph. The final step in becoming a disciple is decision. We become a life student of Jesus by deciding. It will not just happen. We do not drift into discipleship. Knowing God is not going to just happen. It doesn't happen by osmosis. It is a choice. And I love the last sentence here. We do not just drift into discipleship. You can't just halfway do it, not really commit. Well, going back to what I said earlier about playing it by ear, you can't just play it by ear and hope that you somehow drift, that your boat somehow drifts into this discipleship. It is very purposeful to make that decision, to make that choice, to carve out that space. Just like it is when we choose to do other things in our life, whether it is our work or our children, our house, our vacation home, whatever it is we're choosing to do, those are all, whether we realize it or not, those are all purposeful decisions. So we have to make the same type of decision with God. We have to remember as we go down this path that we aren't the ones actually doing the work either. Let's read a couple different passages on this. We cooperate with God's sovereign work of transformation through the spiritual disciplines. Tragically, the true intent and practice of the disciplines have been co-opted by our activist, self-help culture. But spiritual disciplines are means of grace. They are ways of receiving something from God, not doing something for Him. They work on us. They don't work on God. They are ways of accessing the infinite resources of the kingdom of God for our lives. So society, going back to the first part of this statement, we're all about self-help. We're all about self-reliance. That is bred into us. That is ingrained in our minds and in our culture. And so we are focused on what we can do to accomplish this, not realizing that it's not us that are actually going to accomplish anything. It's God that's going to accomplish it. So when we practice these disciplines, we're not trying to work our way into experiencing God. We're simply carving out the space. We're choosing to make this space for God to act. Let's look at another passage. Once you have made the choice to follow Jesus, the question is, what disciplines will help me remain faithful to that choice? If we want to be disciples of Jesus, we have to live a disciplined life. In the spiritual life, discipline means the effort to create some space in which God can act. It means to create that space in which something can happen that you hadn't planned or counted on. So as you do carve out this space, not only do you have to decide that you're going to carve out the space, you have to decide what rules do you need in your life to help you remain faithful to this space. Once again, going back to the idea of rules or guideposts, they're the stripes on the highway. You have to make sure that you lay out what your rules need to be to stay on this path. So once we create this space for God and keep the space open by these rules that we've put into place to protect this space, this sacred space, then God will use the opening for what He has planned for you. And it will likely not be what you have planned on. That's what I love in the last statement here. It means to create that space in which something can happen that you hadn't planned or counted on. We have mapped out, well, probably going back to our self-reliance again, we have mapped out our lives and where we want to go, where we think we're going to go. But when we create this space, chances are often God's got something else in mind for us. And we have to be open to that. It goes back to the submitting we talked about at the beginning. You are going to choose to submit to God's path, whatever that might be. So as we sort of wrap up this discussion, let's look at an Old Testament passage on choosing God's rules. So this is from Proverbs chapter 4, starting in verse 20. My son, pay attention to what I say. Turn your ear to my words. Do not let them out of your sight. Keep them within your heart. For they are life to those who find them, and health to one's whole body. Above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. Keep your mouth free of perversity. Keep corrupt talk far from your lips. Let your eyes look straight ahead. Fix your gaze directly before you. Give careful thought to the paths for your feet, and be steadfast in all your ways. Do not turn to the right or to the left. Keep your foot from evil. So what we have here is an Old Testament passage that is laying down God's guidelines, God's rules for life. So look at this. Look at this particular page here. You have mouth free of perversity. You have keep corrupt talk far from your lips. So there's two guidelines. Let your eyes look straight ahead, not be distracted. Fix your gaze directly before you. Give careful thought to the paths for your feet, and be steadfast in all your ways. Do not turn to the right or the left. Once again, don't be distracted. Don't let these other options that Satan is continuing to throw at us, that the world continues to throw at us, don't let those options infiltrate this sacred space. Keep your foot from evil. So here it is, this idea of spiritual disciplines. Now, it's not laid out as choosing or praying or journaling, but these are the guidelines, or this is one example of guidelines that God laid out thousands of years ago for us. In all of this, we have to remember also, we do have an adversary that is working on a different path for us. He has a different path for us, or he has multiple different paths for us. It just matters which one is going to fit you as far as he's concerned. He has surrounded us in this world with all these different guidelines for these different paths, not God's path, these different ones. So while you are walking down this path, while you're creating space for this path, Satan is always trying to find what other path may actually distract you and get you to go down a different one. And he continues to try different ones. So choosing to make space for God is our avenue to know him and to experience his love. I really pray that you review what spaces you have created in your life, or which ones you haven't, and maybe adjust those. It is difficult to stay on that path, but nothing is too difficult for God, and that is one thing we have to continue to remember. In fact, going back to the Lamentations passage that we talked about early, we have to always remember that we have new mercies every morning, and when it doesn't seem to work today, or we think we have failed, that we pick ourselves back up and we continue to choose to go down that path. We do not redecide whether or not we're going to go down that path. We choose to continue to go down that path. So I hope this has been helpful to give you some perspective and a process and sort of a viewpoint of what it means to choose, what it means to give God the space to act.
Well, Don, it's good to see you. Thanks for taking this time. I'm interviewing you for a couple of reasons. One, you are one of the teachers in a new class, Rhythms of the Inner Life. And you are one of a group of individuals who has spent at least twice going through a year-long spiritual journey. And then you spent some time in a kind of a specialized retreat in the mountains of Colorado for some extended solitude. And we've asked you to teach a class called Choosing, Give God the Space to Act. And so this is one aspect of spiritual formation. And what I'd like to do with this interview is just to pull a little bit more out of that class. And to begin with, you told me once that this idea of spiritual formation it's not new, it's ancient, it's just been lost for a while, as the writers have said, but it is kind of new to some people. And I remember when it was new to me, and you told me that it was a relatively new way of talking about faith for you. And so what has been some of the most significant changes for you as you've thought through spiritual formation?
Well, I would say probably a couple of different things have sort of been, have reminisced, sort of resounded with me. One of them is how simplistic the disciplines really are when you get down to it. Once you sort of hear a lot of the disciplines, they're relatively basic, quite frankly, and in some ways easier than you might think they are. Now, it's not always easy to be disciplined and implement them all, but the concepts are relatively basic. I mean, it doesn't take any kind of brain surgeon to do, these spiritual disciplines and everything. And once you start hearing them, they make sense too. It's just a lot of common sense as you sort of walk through them. So that's one of the first things I probably learned is it's not this multi-year journey of really, learning calculus to figure out how this works and everything. That's not really the way this works. So that's the first thing. The other thing is I have had to probably take a step back and figure out that it's really not only are the concepts simple, it's not really about me accomplishing anything as much as it is allowing God to do something with me, which is a little bit counter to what a lot of the world talks about us all the time. We have to get all this head knowledge and we have to get all this, not necessarily wisdom, but you have to get all this intelligence and you have to learn all these smarts, all this book smart in order to accomplish something. And this is sort of the opposite. It's more about making space, calming down, slowing down, journaling, thinking. Certainly there is some study and meditation, along with it, but it's really about God doing a lot of the work and choosing to clear a path for him to do that work. So that's probably the other aha I've had as we've gone through this. Okay.
And I can see why that topic of clearing some space for God to act was real important to you. Mm-hmm. You and I both grew up in a kind of a spiritual movement that prized having a lot of head knowledge, and I value that, and I know you do too. Knowing Scripture, being familiar with it, knowing how to look it up, and being able to even quote it. Mm-hmm. But knowing Scripture and then living by it and dwelling on it, mulling it over, is something we've kind of lost. Mm-hmm. Meditation and pondering, and we don't seem to have time for that. And I've heard you say that in your class that we can even read about and come to know other people's stories of their experience with God, but that's still not the same as having our own. It can be deceptive. And I really liked your point about that. And I thought, being a head knowledge movement, I'd like to hear you talk a little bit more about that difficulty of moving from just head knowledge and even knowing other people's experience with God to having our own experience with God.
Right. Well, I agree with you that the head knowledge movement, if you want to call it that, in a lot of ways, I'm very proud of it, because when you do have conversations with people, you can tell there has been an emphasis in our fellowship on knowing what God has said. And that is so crucial. But that is really just sort of, that is not the end game. It's just sort of a stepping stone to actually come to this relationship with God. I think you have to have a lot of that head knowledge to foster the environment, but that's not what gets you there ultimately. And I have heard people stand in the pulpit and, recite from memory like a full 3 chapters out of Romans or, whatever it might be. And, that's great that you put that to memory, but I don't know what it's really accomplishing just standing there reciting it. I mean, that's also the world telling us that you need to accomplish something by getting all this head knowledge, right? You need to get smarter and smarter. That's what the world does in every other facet of our life. It tells us you need to get smarter. You need to go to more training, get more understanding on a subject, to really, so you can accomplish something. And like I said earlier, that's not what this is about. This is about God accomplishing something. And you need to have some of that head knowledge to understand how he works and how he thinks and what his grand plan is. But ultimately, if you read through a lot of the Psalms and everything, it's a lot about being still and waiting for him. And sometimes even some of those Psalms, the author is saying some of those things after he has taken his steps to go accomplish something and it didn't work. It failed. And so now he's taking a step back and saying, I'm going to let you do something about it. Right. Yeah. So that's what this game is really about. And the head knowledge is so deceptive. This is one way I think Satan works on us is, telling you have to do it. You have to, it has to be all you, basically. Right. God will accept you if you get it all right. And that's not how this works ultimately. So the head knowledge is such a crucial piece, but it's just a piece.
Right. I've even heard people that were really adept at memorizing, but where it took them was to pride. Right. They were proud and they wanted to showcase what they had accomplished, which is the opposite of where God wants to take us. Right. The topic that you chose in your class was called Giving God the Space to Act, clearing the space. And we are really good at clearing space in our lives for lots of other things, for sporting events and for exercise and for education, even going out and spending an evening at a nice meal with our spouse, even being very diligent about clearing space for brushing our teeth. So we're good at that. So why is it so difficult for some to take the time and clear the space for God?
My thought on that is there may be a couple of different reasons. Part of it is we are sort of in a society that is instant gratification. And so this path sometimes, allowing God to work, one thing I have to keep in mind is God is not working on our timeline. In fact, if you want to get real philosophical about it, I don't even believe God lives within my timeline, right? He lives beyond our time and space. And so time is nothing to him. But for us, we have trouble being patient and waiting on this to happen. So I think that can be it. The other thing, I for 1 second, I don't believe that Satan is out there. He's out there working against us. He can't cause us to do anything, but he can certainly put a lot of obstacles in our way, or a lot of noise in our ear, a lot of things that are drawing us away. I mean, there's a little bit of this draw of the worldly things, the temptations of the flesh and everything that can draw us away also. But there are so many things bombarding us all the time, wanting our attention. I mean, we carry around phones that, all those app makers, they all want their app on your homepage, and they continue to remind you all the time, notify you, 100 times a day if you'll let them, to remind you to check their app, right? So they are trying to come up with their plan for you, and we don't wait for God to come up with his plan for us. We let all these other people, these other entities, come up with a plan for us. That was one of the things I learned. It was actually on a financial topic, but someone once told me that if you don't make a financial plan, someone else will make a financial plan for you, but it's usually not for your benefit. It's for their benefit ultimately. Right. So, and that's true in any other facet of our life. Is I can coast through life and not have a plan, or not let God create a plan for me. Well, someone else will fill that vacuum with a plan, but it won't be for my benefit. It will be for their benefit somehow. They don't want to, they're not going to put in an effort for a plan for me that's going to benefit me. It's going to benefit them. Yeah.
Yeah. One thing you said in your class was that to make a commitment to do this, to clear the space, part of that is I don't leave a crack, I think you put it, for redeciding. Yeah. I don't want to have that out there, because if I have it there, I've already damaged the commitment. And so why would you say that's the case? Why is it so deadly to have redeciding as an option out there? What do you mean by that?
The redeciding, and this is even comes from, in my own life, on whether it's, I'm going to start doing something good or I'm going to give up something bad. It can happen on either end of the spectrum. But what it is it is a little bit of a barometer on whether you're really committed to the topic. I mean, if you really are going to, in the back of your mind, say, I'm going to start this, I'm going to give up this bad habit, but in the back of your mind, you're thinking, unless X happens or Y happens, I'm going to have an opportunity. I'm going to give myself an opportunity to slip back into this. And that sometimes I think, to be frank, I think consciously we actually think that sometimes maybe we don't do it consciously, but that's the way we're geared a little bit, is that, I can backslide into that. And so if I catch myself redeciding on something, I really have to ask myself, was I really committed to it to begin with?
Really ever decide. Yeah.
And the flip side of that is, I mean, it's not to beat people up, because the fact is, the Bible tells us there are new mercies every morning. And so when we do find ourselves in those positions where, okay, I clearly have let myself redecide and I've clearly, sort of backslid on this, well, that's when the new mercies tomorrow morning are going to come into play. And I'm going to decide, hopefully for good, not leave open the door of redeciding, but I'm going to commit to this and be serious about it this time. And that is not undifficult, if undifficult is a word. That is a tough thing to do when you've spent 30, 40, 50 years doing something one way, and I need to change. But like I said, the new mercies every morning, God is patient. He will wait on us. And so we just have to commit to doing it and commit to not redeciding. That was one of the biggest things in this study that I really picked up, is this concept of redeciding. And it's probably because I immediately identified, well, yes, there's been 24 times I can think of off the top of my head of where I've allowed that to happen, or possibly made a decision to do something with it in the back of my mind that, well, I'll just change it if I don't like the way this turns out, right? I'll go back to what I was doing before.
Right. I thought you made some great points in your class about how technology has not helped us slow down.
Right.
I mean, it's been designed to help us. They said eventually we'd have the 4-day work week, and because technology would be doing so much for us, but it's not really helped us slow down and live saner lives. And so knowing this about technology, what do we do about it? And how do we look at technology? Can you say that it can still help us? I know I say that because there are a kind of a fringe groups that have totally given it up. Mm-hmm. They go back to the 15-volume encyclopedia set instead of having it on their phone. But is there a way to say, well, technology can still help us? What do you think?
Well, I certainly think technology can. I am a big believer that everything that has been created for us. And so in and of itself, it's not evil. It's not bad, right? And so, I mean, technology is a gift from God, right? I mean, he allowed this to happen. And when it put it in its proper place, I think it can be helpful. Now, that may be a personal decision for everybody that, they decide, well, some people may decide, I just need to give this up to make sure I'm clearing space for God. And so that's what I'm going to do. And that is, perfectly fine. But we can have technology available to us. Once again, though, we have to recognize that it is going to be an avenue for Satan to get to us, just yet another channel for him to create a lot of noise for us. I actually think in recent months, I think he's done a really good job keeping everybody attuned to the noise of the world, right? We've all become sort of consumed with it, and technology has been a big driver in that, I think, no doubt. So we just have to keep it in its proper place. And once again, that's part of the reason it is so important that we choose to block out all this stuff for God. We cannot, you only have 24 hours in a day, and you cannot allocate time for all these other things and think you're still going to have time available for God. And so you have to really sort of jail block off the time for God and protect that to the exclusion of all these other things. And if that means giving up the technology, then maybe so be it. Maybe that is what needs to happen. But we have to continue to protect. And I would argue technology is, I guess, if in some ways, can be our affliction in this day and age. In another day and age, it was something else, right? It was, every day and age has had its own challenges at crowding out God. And this happens to be one that we deal with. One of the other things you mentioned a second ago that I want to hop back to is technology was supposed to give us the 4-day work week and, make everything easier. What I've learned about that is the fallacy of that concept is we thought we could just change this one variable in life and everything else would just stay the same, right? So we get our work done more efficiently because of technology and nothing else will evolve around it. And that's not the way the world works, right? When you move one lever, it has this effect on everything else. And that's what's happened with technology. So we know we have to be, once again, put it in its proper place and be careful on what we think technology can do for us or will do for us. At the end of the day, you have to protect that space for God because we, as Christians, we should definitely know what that can do for us, over everything else.
Right. The title of your class, the subtitle was kind of a giving God space to act. The title was choosing. And I think that's what I hear you saying is that if we don't make choices, then they'll be made for us.
Right.
And even technology will step in and make choices for us. And so something that you mentioned in your class, this phrase, you said, we don't drift into discipleship. It's a conscious decision. And I thought, okay, what would be some of those discipleship decisions that we would need to make? One of them, I think, would be clear the space for God to act. But what might be some other discipleship decisions that we would need to make?
I think there are some, in some ways, some obvious ones. I think you have to protect this avenue of prayer. And even when I have some of my, more consistent times of praying, there have been times just praying in the morning, God, I'm giving control over to you. It's not even always asking for all my wish list. It's just, I want to give you the space to do something, and sort of continue to pray that. I do think we talked about head knowledge earlier, gaining some of that head knowledge, meaning studying, being in the Word, not instead of being in the athletic magazine, you're in the Word all the time, right? Because whatever you're putting in, that's what's really going to resonate in your life long term. So you have to stick with that. There are things, the fellowshipping with other Christians and other like-minded people. One of the difficulties I think this last year is we have been more apart than we normally would have, and there will always be a concern that that's impacted some of those relationships and some of those influences. When we weren't around like-minded people during the year and getting their influences, the influences we are getting are just coming in through the noise, through the TV or the internet. Right. And I think that can be it's sort of proving out that can be detrimental. And so you have to, one of the disciplines is making sure we're protecting some of those relationships and those influences on us. So that's, a handful of them. And, when I sit here and talk about them, they do seem relatively not easy. They seem pretty obvious, right?
Right.
But until you sit down and really think through this, it may not be as obvious as it appears on the other side. And that's what whether it's Rhythms of the Inner Life or some of your retreats or some of these studies, that's what has been almost as good as anything, is just thinking through these concepts that are pretty straightforward and obvious, but they weren't obvious to me before I had, sat down with somebody and talked through it with them. So that's been one of the big lifts I've got out of this whole program. Okay,
well, good. One final thing, just a brief elaboration on this. You compared the concepts. We've given space for other things, and you compared the concepts of playing baseball and playing piano and working like a carpenter, and how those things, you get better at what you repeatedly do. And the Christian life, you said, is much the same way. And just elaborate on that just a little bit more as we close our time.
It's as simple as practice, right? I mean, if recently I took my girls out and we were playing basketball with some of the family, and I hear one of them saying, I can't make the basket and all that. And it's like, well, of course you can't. You haven't been out there and shot it 1,000 times like these basketball players have, right? That's how you become successful at that. And people who make things look easy, like the basketball player who can, do the perfect layup and it looks like he's just floating in air. Well, it's only because he's been out there for hours and hours and hours and done it. So when going back to, you were talking about, we can read about people who've experienced God and they make it look so easy. Well, it's because they've spent a lot of time doing it to begin with, and they have practiced and practiced and practiced. And I'm convinced it does become easier once you continue to practice at it for so long. So that's really, that concept is the shortstop. He really has fielded 1,000, ground balls, and he knows exactly how it's going to hop, and he knows how to field that thing. So it's all about just repetition and sticking with it. And when you figure out that I'm not sticking with it like I should, you have the new mercies tomorrow morning, and you get up and you start anew.
Start all over,
Keep practicing.
Yeah. Right. Well, it was, I guess, Jesus himself said, my yoke is easy, my burden is light. And I've wondered if we believe that, if we believe his way of life is easy. But if I kind of dabble in his life, it is going to always be difficult. But if I give myself over to compassion and generosity and patience and kindness, and I make it a way of life, then over time, that becomes who I am. My yoke is easy. So those are great points, Don. Well, thank you for taking just a few minutes to expand a little bit on your class.
Right. Sure.
And I look forward to more time in the future to hearing you teach. And may God bless you and have a rest of a great holiday.
All right. Thank you very much.